and we are going to begin. So hold on one second, please. All right, I wanted to make sure that you all can hear this.
In honor of Asian American and Pacific Islander Month, I would like to welcome you to the Office of Human Rights and Equity's AAPI Heritage Month celebration. During the last year, AAPI communities have endured an increase of violence, hate speech, and persecution due to fear, ignorance, and a lack of genuine connection and understanding. We have a responsibility to ensure that all of our residents are and feel safe, respected, and treated with dignity that we all deserve. This month and beyond, we reflect upon the historic and current contributions of our AAPI brothers and sisters. This event will provide entertainment, education, and a genuine way for us to learn more about our AAPI community. Participating in this event are community members and organizations that have a desire to share a piece of their culture to enrich our collective culture. Please join us as we continue to grow, learn, laugh, work, and play as a unified community. Thank you.
All right, so that was a message from our amazing county executive to start us off. And I feel like he embodied everything that we want to make sure this event embodies, which is essentially making sure that we're honoring the full breadth of the Howard County AAPI community. And so that's definitely going to be a difficult task, and it's something that we're going to continue to work on. But again, this is something that we wanted to really head on, make sure that we were doing with some intentionality. And so to start off, this is just the welcome. And so today we are going to be veering more into the territory of data, of information, and getting a better understanding and a collective understanding of our county's makeup from the perspective of the AAPI community. And so if you joined us a little bit early, you might have gotten a chance to see this welcome message, which essentially just gives a better understanding and kind of captures what the county executive was saying in terms of what this series is going to be about. So today is the launch, and we are attempting and going to have 7 different activities, 7 different events throughout the entire week, all representative of different pockets of the AAPI community. And so this specific session is aimed at giving kind of a collective understanding of how our county interacts with that. And so to start off, I think it's very important for us to understand the lens that we have as the county, the lens that we have as American citizens. And so we are based off of Western models, a Western lens, if you will. There are things that encompass that. So the Western medical medical model is definitely one. In terms of understanding how it affects and interacts with our culture, there are things that might not be commonplace in all cultures, but are definitely the baseline, kind of like the default in terms of American culture or Western culture, which it's important to understand what we might be using as a lens when we're interacting with different cultures. And so rugged individualism, which essentially indicates an ideal where an individual is totally self-reliant and independent from outside, usually state government assistance. It's essentially saying that you can pull yourself up by your own bootstraps. Essentially that phrase that we hear pretty often. It's also expected that you inherently respect or trust authority and that they always have your best intention. And then also in terms of systems, formal systems of intervention are usually preferred as opposed to informal interventions, which can be very different for different cultures, which is more within that family, peer, community, or spiritual religious group, or even like the context of protest to show that you're displeased with something that's happening. And so from a Western lens, these are the things that might be at contrast when we're thinking about the different cultures that are within our county, that exist within our county, that actually are trying to hold and maintain pieces of their culture while infusing it with our own culture. And so it's important to also understand from a census perspective when we're talking about the context of Asian, because AAPI, Asian American Pacific Islander, is a huge group. It's very encompassing of a lot of different nationalities, of a lot of different ethnicities, cultures, religions. And so in order for us to actually understand what it is that we're talking about, we need to all have a baseline understanding of what it is that we're talking about from the census perspective. When we're talking about census data, which is what we're going to get into later, when they're saying Asian, what they're essentially meaning is what we see on the screen. A person of origin from the Far East, Southeast Asia, or Indian subcontinent. And then we have the examples that include. And so this is an all-encompassing group. It is very, very hard to have one monolith or one thing that is going to collectively unify or signify all of these different cultures. And it's actually doing ourselves a disservice if we look at AAPI communities, AAPI Heritage Month, or even this Asian census data as being essentially just a monolith, one culture. And so as we dig deeper into the data, we have to also understand trends. We have to understand that things have changed over time. And so what we're looking at right now is the data trend in terms of population. The green is non-white Hispanic, and then we have the blue as other races. And so you can see that there's been an uptick of other races coming into the county, where essentially we're at about 50% now. And so that's 50% of different cultures infusing with the traditional American culture, where we're trying to create a community where we're all thriving, living together, honoring each other, and creating a hybrid culture that's collective, that's inviting, where we all belong. And so as this process is going on, it's important for us to also make sure that we're doing the work, or at least recognizing possible hiccups that might come up as things change. To give a little bit of a better insight as we zero in on our area and also just Maryland in general, what we have on the screen right now are demographics from the perspective of Maryland on the left side, and then more so Howard County on the right in terms of foreign-born population. And so it's important to note, in terms of Maryland, when we're looking at the global population, out of the top three, the top two are within that AAPI community. And actually, I was looking at a couple of different data points today, and El Salvadorian and India go back and forth right now. So I believe at the moment, Indian has the highest foreign-born residency within Maryland. And so it's important for us, again, to understand what does this mean? How does this break down for where we live, for how we're interacting with one another, or how we're not interacting? As we get into a better understanding of Howard County, here's the breakdown of population by race and ethnicity. And so again, today we're going to be focusing more on the AAPI community. And so when we're looking at the AAPI community, what that breaks down to, if it's a little bit hard to see because it's a bar graph, you can't see the specific lines. When we're looking at the Asian alone, and again, remember, Asian is what we broke down within that census definition, is 18.3% of the population, 18.3% of the population, which is the third highest. Now, when we go to the Native American, Asian, Pacific Islander portion, it is very hard for us to actually determine how many we have. From the census data that I saw around 0.004 population size, which was very, very small, but it's still around 3,000 people within our county. So it's still an important number to just pay attention to. And again, data is important, but again, we're looking at it as numbers. These are human beings. So even one person as an individual is important for us to pay attention to, important for us to make sure that that person belongs and that their culture is accepted. And so as we're looking at this, we have to understand this is a third of our population. Does that represent the ways in which we interact with them, the ways in which we understand, or the ways in which their culture is infused into our county? Now we dig into deeper data points. We break down into the rate of poverty. This is also very important to look at in comparison to our population rate. And so again, you have Asian in that third category, but again, it looks like there's a little bit more significance in the Native American and the Pacific Islander categories, which are very interesting. Pacific Islander, again, you can't really see. So when you add these two together, it's about 19%. In terms of rate of poverty, it's about comparable. Something that's very interesting and important to note is population rate is equal to the poverty rate. Like if there's no overrepresentation or underrepresentation, then essentially you know that there maybe aren't any things that are happening that are undermining the abilities for people to live their best life. Maybe some things that we might not recognize, some laws, some stipulations that might unintentionally be causing consequences that are hindering people from living their best life. So when we look at this data, at least from this standpoint, and again, these are just data points, not telling the entire story. In terms of rate of poverty, it seems that there isn't an overrepresentation. There's literally like a slight underrepresentation at 17.4%. And again, the population size is about 19% total. Important to note, especially when we're thinking about how communities want to allocate resources, what we should be mindful of in terms of what communities need. But again, what is really important to note about the population size, and this especially when we're talking about poverty rate, that this is not disaggregated. So when we're looking at this Asian category, all of those different communities that exist within the AAPI category are in them. And so there might be subcategories or portions of the community that might be suffering things disproportionately, but when they're pulled into the same algorithm, it is very hard to see how they're experiencing things. Again, as we dig deeper into just wage and looking into something that is connected to resources, which is money, we can see that there is a really good representation in terms of, again, that Asian category, which is encompassing of all of the AAPI groups in managerial positions or in high paying positions. Just about in every category, they're the highest paying, except for in the elementary and middle school, I believe. Or is this, oh no, that is the highest. I believe this is for the other one. But again, you can see comparable, like the price size. The thing that is important and interesting to know is what I'm going to get into next, which is not just wages, but essentially the median or average household income. And so when we're looking at this, we can see that there's a very high percentage in terms of income. In Howard County in general, we have like really good income, median income. It's very high. And so sitting very high, and it doesn't seem as though income is an issue for that category. However, again, we have to be mindful that this is encompassing of a lot of different groups. And so there could be blind spots that are hiding within these demographics that we're not aware of. There could be populations that are pulling the demographics to one side and not necessarily pointing us in the direction of outliers. Something that will be very interesting for us to do as a county, and is very important, not just within the AAPI community, but within all of our communities, especially because of how intricately connected we are in terms of different cultures and how much diversity we have, is trying to disaggregate some of this data. Because in just about all of these categories, there are multiple different stories that are being told from the perspective of ethnicity and race and culture. So as we think about where we live and how we experience one another, in terms of also looking at those resources, we might have an understanding of how our county is set up. Especially if you live in Howard County, you might know where the areas are that are more affluent, that have more resources possibly, or easier access to resources. And so what we're looking at right now is just essentially concentration of the different populations. And so I couldn't actually find a map of that would be this detailed of any other groups, which is again more telling of reasons why I think it would be important for us to maybe put a little bit more energy or time into disaggregating this data, because I think it could really point us in the direction of understanding the stories and the narratives that are happening for the unsung, for the people that are not being spoken for or might not have their voice at the forefront. When we're looking at this, this is giving us an understanding of where different populations are allocated, and if there's essentially quote unquote self-segregation, or how people are choosing or where people are choosing to live. But again, we have to remember, thinking about wealth disparity, that median income, does this also connect to areas that might have more resources, that might have higher property value? And then how does that connect to the ability for other people within the county to interact with one another? So based on where we live, based on where we shop, even within a county, is very much dependent on the different cultures that we interact with. We all might be in the same spaces every once in a while, but how often do we choose to live next to each other, interact with each other, or go out of our way to understand a culture that might not be our next door neighbor? And so as we come to a close, I don't want to really drag on with data. I really want us to have a conversation about what this means and what you're taking from this data, and how this might actually give us a better understanding of how we can lean into, again, pulling apart the monolith that I think happens when we look at the AAPI community, especially when we're looking at that 18%, trying to understand what ways in which we could help our citizens the best, making sure that we're not missing any blind spots. And so one of the things that we like to do to make sure that people are not unintentionally causing blind spots, kind of like preemptive work, is making sure that we're giving people awareness, some affirmation, and transparency with how we actually interact with one another. And so we just went over a lot of data. And there's a reason why I don't want us to continually talk about data. I feel like numbers sometimes can confuse people also, and you can skew data. It's really important to make sure that we disaggregate that data. And so how you can do that from your own standpoint of walking through the world as yourself, finding a way to connect to different populations, finding a way to connect to different communities. Communication skills, not necessarily cultural data or research, lead to genuine interaction and understanding. This is especially effective in communities where cultural/ideological differences are present and should be celebrated. And so again, we were talking about that dichotomy between the Western lens and any other lens of the amazing people that come to our county that are thriving here, especially within the AAPI community, as we're talking about this month. And so there are differences, but we can learn from those differences, and they should be celebrated. It is very easy to not have the communication skills to understand or seek to understand what we're actually seeing and how some of the data points might be misleading or actually telling a different story than our own narrative. This is going to lead us to a place of cultural humility, which is essentially knowing that we don't know everything and having awareness of our own cultural bias, not allowing it to fully dictate our own actions. And so we have something we like to do called bystander intervention and cultural awareness training. And that's where we actually get to the data from a wider standpoint of what we were talking about. And we actually get a chance to practice and see some of these things happen in real world. So it's experiential learning. Whereas this is kind of like a presentation to give us a groundwork and a layout of understanding of the AAPI community. It is really important for us to also make sure that you all know that there are resources that we intentionally have, not just necessarily this week, but that we're continually doing so that people can have the tools that they need to lean into themselves as well as other citizens, regardless of background. And so again, this message might not be as relevant in the next couple of weeks if things keep going the way that they're going. But again, our offices are closed, but even if our offices are closed, we are still here for you as an office for whatever your needs are. Our intention is to make sure that we're celebrating and providing space for community members and residents to live their best life, to make sure that they're honored, to provide tools to make sure that we're honoring each other and that we're creating the collective society that we want. And so at this time, we want to shift to questions, and I will invite you all, if you'd like to cut your mic on or your camera on, and I'll stop screen sharing for a bit so it'll be easier for us to see each other. But even if there's like something that you would like me to go back to and explain further, this would be the perfect opportunity.
Hi, Trent. This is Ming. I have one question. I know we all have like, you said 7 different events, right? Okay. So my question is this. Within, well, each ethnic group itself will promote their own event, right? Within the group, we can make the event like a party, you know, among our own people. But the goal for these events are actually to educate people in Howard County about different cultures from AAPI groups. So how, at the county level, how do you promote these events?
So in terms of our office, we have a pretty good following because we've been doing a lot of these different events with different cultural groups. We try to make sure that we honor whenever there is a month celebration, that we honor that culture in whatever way that they feel is how they want to be honored. We don't like to create things and prescribe things. We like to make sure that it's within the community. And this was no different. And so with that being said, all the different networks that we have that we reach out to, including our social networks, including on our website, we make sure that we're promoting this there. Now, in terms of this specifically, there was some intentionality because I was the person who tried to send out this information, with sending it out to specific organizations that are going to be participating and making sure that they're sending it to their community members, but then also making sure it's sent to the school system, it's sent to other government agencies, it's sent within our offices, and asking people to send them within our networks as well, because we all have different networks within outreach. And it's also being shared within county government in general.
All right, thank you.
Yes, definitely.
Hi, Jen. This is Jody. How are you?
Hey, Jody.
Can you hear me? Hi. Sorry, I'm on my way home, so probably missed something. Yeah, I want to check
No worries.
in. Yeah. So we are busy preparing for the last day. So the last day, because you create the county create the link. So basically, you are the host side, right? So if when we want to play, we have the authority to play the the videos.
No, I will be there for every single event. I will be the person kind of behind the scenes, making sure everything happens. And then each of us are going to make sure that we like check in with each other. So like we're going to have like an off-site meeting beforehand, and we're going to make sure everything's good. But I'm going to be the person that's handling everything.
Okay, so I will send you all the.
Sounds like though there is a lot of changes in the county in terms of demographics. I'm wondering whether you have any kind of, not historical, but at least a few years of a comparison. For example, whether this year were kind of so much changes the last year, or what do you see as those kind of data, and how do you interpret it if indeed that there is yet that much changes? I think that will really help us to understand, again, why people come here to the especially Howard County, and how we are going to be able to welcome them, and how we are going to be able to kind of mingle. And the other question is that in terms of those income, I'm wondering whether there are any kind of a different in terms of ages. You know what I'm saying? Whether Asian population have more productive age in such a way that we contribute a lot more versus not only seniors or something like that. Whether there are any changes in terms of productivity. Obviously, people who are working, they will make money versus people who are not working. So I'm wondering those two questions, what is your thoughts on?
Very good questions. I like data a lot. Like, I feel like I wish we had more access to data. I think that it's dangerous though. So like, I'm also kind of happy we don't have a lot of data floating around. I think that what I've seen, so what I use from I can only speak from like the OHR outreach perspective when we go into the community and we're trying to make sure that we're understanding our community. There is US data, which is essentially a website that has the census data that's mostly up to date. And it gives you a really clear breakdown of literally any category that you want, from like religion to race to ethnicity to age to gender. And so when I'm using this data, I understand how to disaggregate data and how to break it down. So I'll take two graphs and be able to break them down based off of the numbers. I'll do it to try to understand what is, again, if there's an overrepresentation or an underrepresentation within like the rate of poverty for a specific group. Now, that's something that can be easily done in that moment. But when we're talking about disaggregating the entire column of like that Asian category, that's something that I don't even know if we have the infrastructure to do yet. And so that would mean we would essentially have to be asking within that pocketed community, how do you identify, and then having the entire list of AAPI communities and countries on that list to see where the data points lie. And then crossing that data with, again, poverty, population, so on and so forth. And so there are like, I think when you look at census data, and SOP is actually, when you look at like census data, you can kind of see it. I don't know if it breaks down again that Asian category for us within our county, for us to, and that's kind of where I think our work could possibly be, is being able to maybe disaggregate, because I think that our county has a unique circumstance. We're very diverse and we have a lot of different communities. And so when we're looking at white, Black, Asian, just for example, those categories in general have a lot of difference. Or even when you go white, Black, Asian, Hispanic, huge different countries of origin, different ways of experiencing the world, different reasons why they might have come to the county, whether it be because they might have come here because they were a refugee, or they might have moved from Baltimore. And those are very different, and they can exist within the same category. Being able to disaggregate that data would be able to tell us that story a little bit better. And so we don't really have what I think you're asking for, but I think it's something that we should be moving into. And I know that as we're trying to understand the landscape more and we're leaning into equity as a county, that's something that's going to continually come up, because we have to have an understanding of our population before we can make sure we serve our population fully. The second question, just to make sure that I understand it fully, I actually lost it. So if you wouldn't mind just repeating, giving like a short synopsis of your second question.
Well, there are kind of a trend in terms of data.
Oh, trends. Yes.
Right.
So trends you can definitely see in terms of looking at the census, like you can see a little bit better. Within our county, we definitely have like, there are like an influx. I think we had an influx, small influx of like some of the Burmese and Chin family populations for different reasons. And so that means that something is happening and that we might need to provide certain resources, or at least be mindful of how they might be experiencing the county, or at least how other people might be experiencing them and not understanding what's going on. And so I don't know if we really know from a county, from like a citizen standpoint, like the trends, right? But I think that we understand when you look that we change every year. We become more diverse every year, we see it. But in terms of being able to really, I think, pull that apart, I'm not sure if we have the infrastructure yet. But I think in terms of us moving to equity, again, as a county, the intention is to map out what we have so that we can make sure that we're equitably giving everyone what they need. And that's kind of a part of the process, if that makes sense.
And I'm just going to jump in real quick here. And so I think Trent did a wonderful job explaining the demographics and everything. So as we all know, the census took place last year, which showed that Howard County had about a 13% population increase. So the specific county data, we haven't received that yet from the federal government, but we will get that in August. So that'll help break down things more. So just be on the lookout for that.
Good. Thank
Thank
you.
you, Safa. You're a lifesaver.
I got you.
But yes, the intentionality is always to make sure that we're leaning in with equity. And again, like part of the reason why I think it's important for the Office of Human Rights and Equity to make sure that we're addressing each one of our communities is to make sure that we're not looking at any community as a monolith, as one centralized community.
Thank you.
I hope that answered your question, Sue.
Yes, it did. Thank you.
And again, the space is open. If anyone has any other questions or even wants to make a statement or anything. The intention was to keep this space for 2 hours because we didn't know if we would have 5 people or 500 people. And so there could have been a lot of questions. And so we're here till 8:30 as long as you would like, but I also don't want to waste you all's time, if that makes sense.
Hi, Trent. Can you bring up the slides? The one about Western culture lens. The one.
Yes, I got you. Give me 1 second.
All right. Thank you.
Here we go. Okay. There we go.
Okay, Western lens. Okay, what is the first one about medical model? What is Western medical model?
So Western medical model, in terms of like looking at any other Western or any other model of medicine, which is essentially like literally not looking at any homeopathic remedies or looking into indigenous
I
roots.
see.
It's like literally just looking at medicine as going to the doctor and doing what the doctor says, like the authority.
I
You know what I mean?
I see what you mean.
As opposed to a lot of other cultures might have family remedies, might have things that they actually have cultivated in terms of like internal knowledge within their families and recognize, you know, how their bodies react just based off DNA, and they do something else. And that's their remedy. As opposed to, I feel sick, so I'm going to go to the doctor. You feel sick, this is a family remedy or a cultural remedy that we have. So we're going to do this as opposed to go to the hospital.
Okay.
It's just a way for us to have a better understanding of how there's dichotomies in the ways that we think. And again, this is not uniform to everyone. These are just kind of like baselines of how we might possibly look at the world that we might not be aware of, that we wear as from the Western perspective.
I see. Okay. Yeah, I'm trying to read this because my background, I came from socialist China. So obviously, I try to compare what I believed in America because when I got here, obviously, well, I got here in early 1990s. So when we talk about America, it's like we're talking about freedom and democracy. So this is quite detailed. So I'm trying to read through this.
Definitely. And this is going to be just like everything else, since this is recorded, and also just the PowerPoint itself are going to exist with the other resources that are coming from the week-long event.
Right.
Also, if you'd like, I can just send this to you right after, if you'd like.
Oh, okay. That'd be great. Thank you.
Just if you could, I think I have your email already, but just email me in the chat and I'll make sure that it gets right to you. You can do it privately too if you don't want anyone to see your email.
All right, no problem.
Yes, so I see, I'm looking at the chat as well. So as long as everyone is fine, so I'm going to be checking in with each group to make sure that recording is okay. If they are okay with recording, we're going to record. I want to always make sure that we're honoring any intellectual properties or anything that anyone is putting or allowing us to use within this event. And so if for whatever reason they don't feel comfortable or they can't for whatever reason, we won't be recording it. But other than that, yes, the plan is to record it and to make sure that all of the materials are available. So even again, if anyone isn't here, that they have the ability to watch it, including the citizens that don't exist within the AAPI communities. All right. So I feel like this is a good time to maybe close down things in terms of energy, unless anyone has any last things that they'd like to say or anyone has something that they'd like to communicate or ask a question before we leave. Oh, so would you like to come on and say that? I feel like that's an important thing to say.
Hi, this is Mayur Modi from American Diversity Group. Would like to inform our AAPI members happy AAPI Heritage Month, and would like to let the people know that we are offering a free telemedicine for the people who have no insurance, who have no money, or have any kind of barriers to reach the doctors. We have avenues to provide free telemedicine here to the people in Howard County, and there's no question asked, no documents, no immigration status or anything. And it's just a platform that we can help out our AAPI community or any other communities in need of consults with the doctors or anything. So that's through American Diversity Group.
That's amazing. Thank you. That's like perfect. This is a perfect space for things like that, especially because this is recorded. I'm actually gonna ask for your contact information so we can connect offline.
Oh,
Like
okay.
that's important information to
Yes.
share.
Like I actually have it on my cell phone, and I can just put my text message on that and see if I can find a flyer to that. We can even share that flyer to everyone in our AAPI community, and would love to talk to anyone in our group that would like to have any information, and we can be able to help them out in terms of need. And lastly, I'm also doing a free cardiology clinic on June the 13th, but it's in Silver Spring, Montgomery County. We will be offering free cardiology tests like EKGs, ABIs, ultrasound, and a lot of more testings are being done, and consults with the endocrinologist for diabetes. For any cardiology consults, we'll have cardiologist also at the same time. It's like about 15 miles from Howard County and Silver Spring, border of Prince George, Howard, and Montgomery. It's in border of that area.
Thank you so much for that information. I feel like that's really important information to capture and make sure that with your permission, we can share as well within our networks. So I'm sending you my email just so you can email any information that you have on that, so I can make sure that more people get that and it's included in our resources for this event.
Absolutely. I'll just share my email as well, so that way everyone who has any questions or anything, they can even call me on my cell phone as well.
Beautiful. All right, I think this would be a good moment for us to close. Again, I want to thank you all for being present, being here. Even those of you that are going to be watching this recording and aren't necessarily live, it's really important for us to understand not only these data points that we were going over, especially from a just from a baseline, not only just from a county standpoint, but to also recognize that we're looking at people, individuals. And so the entire point of this thing has been focused on recognizing the individual so that we can thrive as a collective. And so there are individual ethnic groups that we need to make sure that we're honoring, that we need to make sure that we're providing equitable resources for. And this month, we're just so happening to make sure that we're focusing on those that exist within the AAPI community, as we do the entire year, but we're highlighting it this month. And so I really appreciate and thank you all for being here on this portion. I hope that you join us as we continue to move more into the actual celebrations, where we're going to be diving into the specific cultures, and you're going to be seeing less of my face and more of the faces of the people who are actually within these cultures that are going to get to share pieces of themselves with you. And so again, thank you and have a beautiful evening.
Thank you. Yeah, bye.